Hi everybody. Hey, it's Barry Harris here. I've decided to come out of the woodwork and talk a little bit about the Thunderpuss and working with Madonna, um, mostly in celebration of the fact that the Thunderpuss mix of Don't Tell Me has been included on her upcoming Finally Enough Love 50 number ones, Billboard number ones. And I don't know, I just felt like telling this story. So the working relationship with Thunderpuss came in a very unusual way, but then everything in this music business is unusual. You never know what's going to happen, when and how or why. So my relationship with Randy Sills, it starts actually with Randy Sills, goes back to even when I did a Top Cat record with DJ Terry Kelly and Moonshine Records. Got licensed to, and they were out of LA, and of course now I was living in LA as well. And he had gotten together with Jeff Haddad around 97, 98, and they created Foreplay Records, an independent label, who was also doing circuit sessions. So I knew Randy previously from when he had worked Feel Cool by Top Cat for us. It did moderately on the charts, but Dave O'Day did a mix, so that's early mid 90s, well, I can't remember now, 95, 96. Anyway, so that's how I knew Randy out of Moonshine Records, who had left Moonshine and was with Foreplay Records with Jeff Haddad. Jeff Haddad owned an antique, from my understanding, an antique furniture store in Beverly Hills. And Jeff Haddad lived behind Madonna's manager. That's how Jeff got to know Carice Henry. So Randy one day was telling me this, hey, you'll never guess what's kind of odd. Jeff's been playing with Madonna's manager. I said, oh, I really want to remix a Madonna song. Because now at this point, just sidetrack, it was now probably spring or summer of 2000. And Thunderpuss we were finally on a roll. We were on our way, as you all know. By November 98, we had done the Whitney Houston, and by that it was 98. And by 99, we were on our way. Whitney was a full-fledged giant hit, and we were getting asked by tons of labels all over the place in 99 and 2000. And I would find it by 2000, a year and a half later, when we were, 2000 is when we made our most money ever. We were such on fire at that point, as a lot of you know. And I found it frustrating that we all knew that everybody knows that getting a Madonna mix was like the crown jewel of mixes to get. And I was like, how can we not have gotten a Madonna mix by now? Maybe I was getting egotistical, Brad, or whatever. But at that point, we had done everybody and worked with almost every major label except Warner Brothers. So we had never done anything with Warner Brothers. It was Orlando, Sergio, and Deborah. Never had ever approached us to do anything on Warner Brothers. But we were doing lots for Arista and Sony and Elektra. I can't remember the names of all the labels now. It was just such a blur. It was just working nonstop. And so I said to Randy, oh, I'd love to do a Madonna mix. And he's like, oh, you would? I was like, duh, of course we would. He goes, oh, I'll ask Jeff Haddad to mention it to Carice. So it was around that time when I guess the music album was out. And so Jeff did mention to Carice, and he told her who we were. And she said, well, okay, well, I'll give them a shot. And then she gave us a CD of the acapellas and the parts, actually. I think it probably would have been the parts of Don't Tell Me. So I was like, yay. So as usual, I would work in the mornings, and Chris would work from like 1, 2 in the afternoon till the wee mornings. And I remember starting with the Don't Tell Me. We knew at that point we did not need to do a spec mix. We were getting paid $20,000 to $30,000 a mix. I'm going to spill the beans on that. And we knew in those days there wasn't really such thing as a spec mix, and we didn't do spec mixes. If a record company wanted us to do a mix, we wouldn't even start it without getting half up front. Like we'd be invoicing them for $10,000 with the 1-page contract. And 99% of the times you did not get royalties with doing remixes, as we did not with any Madonna stuff either, and would not be. It's either to get the remix and $20,000 or nothing. So at that point, so I'm basically doing a mix, like knowing that this could get rejected. So I went into the mix of Don't Tell Me, started it off. I don't know if we had to convert files. I was never technical. Chris might have had to convert the files if they were FLAC or whatever they might have been, or sound design. I'm not too sure what they would have been at the time. I didn't care. And I remember thinking, the thought process was, this is going to have to be, this can't be just our usual crowd-pleasing, hands in the air formula. This is going to have to be something special, and it's going to have to get past Madonna's ears, not an A&R guy, not a record company. And normally that's what would happen, and the artist would just go, well, if you think that's what we need to do, fine. But I knew Madonna, this was different. So I knew it had to have edge, and it had to be something that she had not heard before, or a style. I was very convinced of that. So I did a much more laid back, and I tried to do something at the time that felt a little more progressive and edgy and unusual. So by starting with most of all the a cappella parts and the digital, I came up with that dun, 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 dun. 99% of all the music in the Thunderpuss record that was recreated, I did. I'm going to tell you all that right now. It's just the truth. So that whole little dun, 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 dun was something that first came to mind. And I was re-listening to it. I had to listen because this is now 22 years later. And keeping the bass line simple. I'm sure Chris would have come in and had some of that percussive elements and later. But I started with this type laid back. And I remember saying to Chris, like I said, I don't like the energy of this. I said, we got to get in. We're not, if we do our formula, I don't think if we do a pop record, but basically a popular dance record as we've been doing and knew what to do, this is a different case. This has to be very edgy. And as we often had some of our arguments about things like that, where we often wanted to use what works. And I was always a little more dangerous and gambling with our futures quite often. Sometimes I just went for the formula. Doing the formula was a no-brainer. I knew later, if we get in, I could do a hands in the air mix with my eyes closed. But I had to pull back on this one. So this did have more edginess. I can't remember where the actual sounds and the keyboard sounds came from. Sometimes I would go through them and select them. Often Chris would paint a palette of sounds and kicks and variations of things that the night before, and I would come in and I would, like, it's kind of like he would set up the paints and I would come in and start painting, is what it kind of felt like. And that's kind of what I came up with for most of the Don't Tell Me mix. And then the end process, and then we'd go, then I'd take off in the afternoon, he'd take over and add his bit, what he felt, if he wanted to move forward. Almost every single time we moved forward with what I had started, if he would disagree that I don't like this direction at all, and if I was very firm on it, then we would do 2 separate mixes. We'd still work on mine, and then he'd go down a route that he wanted to go differently. He did it on this time. He went with the road that I had started on and embellished his embellishments. And then at the end, after a few days or so, we'd sleep on it. I can't remember totally, or digest it would build. And after a few days, then we would mix it down. And that's another thing too Chris would do, as he was more technical. He'd be the one that was actually mixing the drums and the EQs and the hi-hats and the vocals and the EQs and the delays and the stuff, because in those days nothing was internal. Everything was outside and everything went to DAT, to DAT tape. Nothing was internal since, until around 2003, 2004, after we split up, is when that stuff started happening. So it was real live synths happening at the time, if not samples. So at the end result, when he felt he was ready, then I would come in, and if I agreed that yes, it's ready, it's done, then I would be sitting at the board. Chris would be sitting behind me at the DAT, pressing play, and we'd go through take one, take two, whichever take felt the best and the right with the kick and stuff, and we'd run it down, and then we'd go for a drive in the car, and we'd do the car test and see how all the balance is. Because when you're working on something, when you're deep inside it, I saw John Lennon say something about that, about musically. When you're really deep inside of it, it's hard to see the outside of it. So after you put it down, you can get entirely different perspective by listening to it, say in the car, suddenly in a way that you never had before. And you can listen to it as a whole, not every little type of nuance. So that's how we used to often do that, do the car test together. And like I said, that's how we run it down, and I'd usually be writing the vocals and stuff, and we'd both be, okay, did that feel right? Is that done? And we'd either agree or we didn't, and then we'd do a vocal up. So the record company could then choose what it is they wanted to do. So anyway, so the bottom line is, then we sent it in, not knowing if we we're gonna get paid at all. I believe, I can't remember if we had met Harris yet, or I think we must have. I can't remember if Jeff gave it to Harris or if we gave it to Harris and went to Maverick. I remember going to Maverick with the Die Another Day. Anyway, that's another story. But going on to the Don't Tell Me. So I think, I want to say it was Jeff that gave it to her. And we got the news through her that through her or him, that, or maybe we talked to her on the phone. And it took a few days for it to be approved, to get back feedback on that. So I assume that it did go to Madonna, as far as I know, for approval or not. And yeah, like I said, that the whole getting in to that camp was this really odd sideways. A friend of a friend knew Harris, who's their manager. And so I think once we did get it approved, then I went in the next morning, whatever morning, a week or so later, and then I did the whole Hands in the Air mix, the one that I knew would be the whole more energetic bass line, all the more drama on it. Now that I'd already knew the song inside out and well and the vibe, now it was time to work on the Hands in the Air. We got in. That's the thing. That's the point. So now I did the Hands in the Air. Well, at the very least, we could use it for our own use. But when I did that, I remember Chris came in and said, when he came in the afternoon, he goes, "That's the mix I wanted all along. Why didn't we do that one in the first place?" And I said, "I told you why." I said, "Okay, fine." So that we ended up submitting it, doing it, had that all done, I don't know, a few days later, and sent it into Warner. And that's when Sergio and Orlando and Deborah, I think her name was, all said, "That's the mix we needed in the first place." And I am to this day convinced if we had submitted that mix first, we would never have gotten the gig in the first place. So that was the method in my madness of why I went for why there's two. And the Hands in the Air, yes, I liked it too, and it's easier to play at more peak time as well than the other one. But the other one's at the time, a little more unusual and edgy, I guess, and a little more artsy-fartsy. And I thought, oh, there you go. That's all I really have to say about that. But from then on, we were now on Warner Brothers' radar. And now which led to Cher, which led to, I think, Gina G, if I remember correctly. And we started getting to know now we were in with all the Warner Brothers people like Mio Vukovic. I hope I got that right. Sorry, Mio, if I didn't. And that's when, later on, when we got then I guess, the Die Another Day, I remember meeting Harris, and we'd still never met. We never did meet Madonna. I was always we would go to Maverick to meet Harris out on Santa Monica. And I was always kind of hoping that Madonna would happen to be there and we'd actually get to meet her, but we didn't. So yeah, well, the bottom line is that's basically our working relationship with Madonna. It was mostly with Harris, And I remember I talked to Carice after I left Thunderpuss, and I'd been off for a few years, and I decided I was going to come back, and I saw her on Facebook, and we reconnected again. And she was like, oh, of course I remember you, and blah, blah, blah. And she was really, really nice and very, very heartfelt, and I really liked her. And then it was a couple of years later that she did herself in, and it was just very sad. I was very saddened about that, to hear that news. But so that's basically, the working relationship with Madonna. Of course, the GHV2 thing, that's a whole nother story. Maybe I'll tell you that story later. There's not a lot to tell on that one anyway. But I would mostly want to talk about the Don't Tell Me, how it came to be, how the two versions came to be, the working relationship with Warner, the working relationship with Carice, and the whole fact that it was Jeff Haddad's relationship with her manager that got us in. It had nothing to do with the record company at the time, which is unusual, but like I've said, I've been around enough working with all these different companies, from Con-Can to indie labels to, I don't know anymore, so I feel like I've seen it all. So anyway, that's basically the story. Cheers all, have a great summer. I guess this hopefully video is up for a while, so who knows how long this is up for. But anyway, that's the story between Thunderpuss and Don't Tell Me. And that's the story, and I'm sticking to it. And what else was I going to say? I guess that's about it. Cheers. Ciao for now.